Happy Monday! Welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. And yes, I'm wearing the most on-brand t-shirt in the world that says buy me a drink. Before we get into balancing the books, I just want to thank the sponsor of this video, Ana Luisa. So Ana Luisa are a jewellery brand that I've worked with a few times in the past before because I just absolutely love their jewellery and everything they stand for. They are a really sustainable company and they make good quality fine jewellery that is designed to last with you your whole life. I am kitted out in so much Ana Luisa jewellery they've kindly sent me over the few times that we've worked together, and I basically never take them off. And the best part is they are running a special Valentine's Day sale right now, so if you use the link in my description box below, you will get 15% off all products. And these are just the perfect Valentine's Day gifts. I'll just show you some of the pieces that I'm wearing today. So I am wearing these beautiful Celeste hoop earrings, which are just stunning. I've got a star and a moon. I'm obsessed with them. And at the sale price, they are £56. And then I am also wearing this stunning Sarah bracelet, which is also £56 in the sale. And it's just gorgeous. I completely adore all of the Ana Luisa jewellery that I've got, and I really recommend it as a place to buy good quality jewellery. They've got really fair prices starting from $39 upwards, so there is something accessible for different price ranges. There's no luxury markup, but these are good long-lasting pieces. And also Ana Luisa are completely carbon neutral. They offset 100% of their carbon emissions. So there are just so many reasons why you should click the link in my description box and go and buy something for 15% off for the perfect Valentine's Day present. So thank you Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video, and now let's get on with balancing the books. So just in case you're new here, Balancing the Books is a game I play every month where I add up all of the books that came onto my TBR with all of the books that came off my TBR and make sure those numbers balance. At the end of last month, at the end of December, my TBR had actually gone up by 2 books, which is the opposite of what we want. So I chose the 2 oldest books I'd had on my TBR and said that I had to read them within the month of January, otherwise they would have to be unhauled. And I have read them both, which means that retrospectively my books for December are now balanced and my TBR is back to 40. But let me tell you about what I thought of these books. This one is William and Englishman by Cicely Hamilton. This is the 4th Persephone book that I have read. I have a whole collection of them and I'm slowly, very slowly working my way through them. Up until this book, every Persephone book that I had read so far had been a 5-star read. I get very intimidated at the thought of picking them up because they're classics and I think they're going to be challenging, and every single one had been a 5-star. This was the first one which unfortunately was not a 5-star read for me, but I upgraded my feelings about it as I read. It was starting around a 3 and by the end I would definitely consider this one a 4-star read. It was a very good book. Just a little hard to get into. I think what's weird about this book is it has a total tone shift. So it starts as a satire. It's very funny. It's making fun of this young married couple, William and his wife Griselda, who are committed socialists and feminists and, social justice warriors of their time. And Cicely Hamilton isn't making fun of those things because she was herself a socialist and a feminist, but she makes fun of them for their rather uneducated and unthinking commitment to their causes. They don't actually know very much about what they're talking about. They don't ever actually consider the arguments. They've just decided on an ideology and they will commit to it no matter what for the rest of their lives, which I found quite uncomfortable reading because I think that's me in a lot of ways. I am very, very passionately left-wing and sometimes to the detriment of not listening to anything conservatives have to say because I just think that it's wrong. But maybe that's not the best approach. And another important thing to know about this couple is they are passionately anti-war. They are strong pacifists and they really, really disapprove of the army and soldiers. However, they are constantly making these analogies of their fight for the causes that they believe in. They view that as a kind of war that they are really proud to get involved in. So that's some context you need to know. They get married, they go off on their honeymoon to France, and they decide for the 3 weeks that they're there to be completely cut off, to not bring any newspapers with them, to not get any phone calls, to just enjoy their honeymoon together. What that means is that they have no idea that during the 3 weeks they are there, World War I breaks out, and they suddenly find themselves in the midst of it in France, being captured by German soldiers. And the book at that point majorly switches pace. At first, the humour does carry on through this transition, so you get a sense of how ridiculous it is that they have no idea they're at war. Even the scene in which they're captured is scary but quite farcical, because they have no idea what's going on, and the German soldiers find it very funny when they realise that this English couple they've just captured have no idea that the world is at war. But very quickly after that, the humour stops. So Cicely Hamilton herself actually worked as a nurse during the war, and that's when she wrote this book. So the second half of the book is absolutely filled with the horrors of war. And William, whose perspective we are mostly following throughout the book, is suddenly awoken from his idealistic world that he's been living in to this harsh reality of what war really is. And it gets really, really sad. So William suffers terrible things, and he then completely discards his old anti-war mentality and is desperate to go and fight. And basically the book just follows his thought process through these terrible, life-changing years that he lives through, of what the war did to ordinary people. So the book is an anti-war book, but not in the same dismissive way that William and his friends were at the beginning of the book. So it was a really powerful book, and it's a book that, probably as you can tell from this attempt at a description, I'm finding quite hard to summarise what the message was, because it was much more nuanced than something I can just put into a few sentences for you. So it's a really, really interesting book that I would like to return to at some point in the future. The other book that I had to read to balance last month was The Unseen by Roy Jacobsen, and unfortunately I did not like this one at all. I found it very dull. It sounded like something that would be just my thing. It said that it's about a girl called Ingrid growing up on this island where literally her family are the only people to live on this island. They do all of their trading with nearby islands, and it's like a very hard manual labour life, and she longs to escape but keeps being drawn back to the island. Love that kind of thing. But Ingrid is a very small child until at least like here in the book. It's not really about her at all, it's about her father. And it's barely even about him. The characters are all written in this very detached way, and it's just a series of episodes of life on this island where humans and nature and labour are all equal characters in the book. You don't get explorations of deep emotions very often. And so I was just super bored. I did read the whole thing instead of DNFing it, because this one has some really good reviews, and I kept feeling like I was going to suddenly get really moved at the ending, because the blurb had said that tragedy was going to strike and Ingrid was going to fight to protect the home she thought she'd left behind. So I kept waiting to see if something was suddenly going to pull at my heartstrings, but it just didn't. I was left totally cold and bored by this book, unfortunately. So that means that we began January with a TBR of 40 books, and now let's go through how this month went for me. The first book that I read was Luster by Raven Leilani, which I'm sure you've heard about because this has been so buzzed about all over the internet. I'd had it so hyped up for me. And I do think this is one of the best written books that I have ever read in my life. However, I didn't actually love the book. As I said, the writing is impeccable. Especially in the first half, I was loving it. It is so perfectly and brutally skewering the experience of being in your 20s. I just kicked the camera. So sorry, let's move you back. So it's partly really relatable to me, but then also had an aspect that doesn't factor into my life, which is race. So our main character, Edie, is one of, I think, only 2 black girls at her very white office, and so we learn a lot about that experience for her. She ends up getting involved with an older, middle-aged white man who is married, but is kind of just in the process of figuring out an open marriage arrangement with his wife. And then she also learns a little way into their relationship that they have an adopted black daughter. And Edie ends up getting sucked into this complicated relationship in a very strange way. And I think this is where, for me personally, I started finding it harder to fall into this story. It just got too dark and weird and upsetting, and I didn't understand the characters at all. So that's not really a criticism of the book. I think for some people this book will work so well. In fact, for a lot of people it will, and I know for a lot of people it has. This has been a really adored book on BookTube already. For me, I just personally couldn't quite relate to any of the characters. I found them all confusing and their motivations a little hard to follow. So that's why I didn't fall in love with this book. But from beginning to end, the writing was amazing, and I'm so glad I read it just for the writing alone. It was like reading a work of art. And then I bought these all 10 books in the Confessions of a Shopaholic series by Sophie Kinsella, and as you all know, if you watched my 24-hour readathon vlog, I've read 7 of them. These 3 I have yet to read, and let's come back to that in a second. I'm not going to do like full reviews of this whole series because if you watch that vlog I talk a lot about them, but my enjoyment of this series plummeted as it went on. Book number 1 is great. It's very funny. It would be very relatable if it wasn't quite so silly, but it's silly in such a brilliant way. I really enjoyed this. I loved this one as a teenager. I loved it just as much when I read it the other day. And number 2, I will say actually the same. Also very, very funny, very engaging and warm. Then I started to feel less warm. I still really enjoyed these 2, Shopaholic Ties the Knot and Shopaholic and Sister, where she meets a long-lost sister. I was enjoying them, but I was starting to get very, very irritated with Becky, our main character, who is this privileged shopaholic who has no idea how to handle any problem without just spending a lot of money or, luckily, finding someone with a lot of money to save the day. That got very grating. I don't mind continuing to see her have her shopping problem throughout the series. I get that. Habits are really, really hard to break. She's allowed to be a flawed character throughout. But I think in a book like this, in this genre, which is kind of light-hearted, rom-com, it doesn't need to have a message, but there's a certain format that you expect, and I wanted to see Becky learn just a single lesson at some point, or have to solve a problem in a new way that she hadn't tried before, and it just kept not happening. She kept coming up with more and more expensive solutions to her problems. Then we have Shopaholic and Baby, where we meet another character who is just as much of a compulsive liar as Becky is, and the compulsive lying thing also really started to grate on me. Like, she needs help. She needs very serious help. And then we have this one, which is the last one I read, Mini Shopaholic, and I cannot tell you how much I hated this book. I didn't manage to finish this one in the 24 hours, so you didn't get my full review in that video, so I'll tell you about it now. It sucked. The book is called Mini Shopaholic. It's supposed to be about her daughter also becoming a shopaholic, or how she deals with seeing her own character flaws being copied in her child. Actually, her child was barely a part of this story. The whole massive fucking story is about her throwing a surprise birthday party for her husband Luke, the most expensive, extravagant birthday party you have ever heard of. And everything goes wrong, and what I thought was going to happen was she was going to have to actually get resourceful. She was going to have to compromise and realise she wanted to do something nice for him. She couldn't just afford this ridiculously splashy party, and she was going to, with her friends, kind of hand make a really sweet celebration. But no, that's not what happens. Thanks to a very rich benefactor, she ends up throwing the most ridiculous sounding party you've ever heard of in your life. And also, she had made a deal with Luke that because she has so many clothes and like buys them and doesn't even wear them, that they're trying to save up for a house, they need money for their child. She'd made a deal that she wasn't going to buy any new clothes until she had worn all of the clothes in her wardrobe 3 times. So that was the deal. And she was already breaking this a lot. She wasn't sticking to it. She was making loopholes by like buying clothes that were for her daughter when she grows up. Like, she sucks at sticking to this. And right at the end, she is talking to her mum, getting ready for this party, and she's feeling a bit low because everyone else is going to have a beautiful new dress and she's not allowed to buy anything. And her mum says, "Oh, come with me, let's go upstairs and look at all the things in your wardrobe." And I thought, this is time for a sweet moment where, with her mum, she manages to compile a new outfit of all of the clothes, not of all of them at once, but using some of the clothes that she'd bought before, and she discovers that she actually already has this amazing wardrobe and she doesn't need to buy anything more. That's what you would think, right? But no, she opens the cupboard and her mum and her dad, plus all of her friends from the shop, like everyone in the world apparently fucking agrees that Becky is entitled to getting new shit all the time, had chipped in to buy her a designer Vera Wang dress, which is allowed in the agreement because they put it in her wardrobe so she can wear it because it's already in her wardrobe. She is the most entitled bitch in the world and everyone around her enables her. It was the most unsatisfying ending to a book that could possibly exist, and I know people like this in real life, people who are that entitled, who genuinely think they deserve that many nice things, and it's such an unpleasant quality. and so I hated her. I don't mind reading stories about rich people. I wouldn't even mind reading this completely ridiculous party. In a certain context, it can be really fun to explore the lives of rich people. What I hated so much in this one is that the entire conflict of the novel is this very, very rich woman feeling like she is entitled to even more lovely things than she already has, struggling with not being able to afford them, and then having it resolved when she manages to convince other people to buy them for her. So at this point, I don't just hate the character, I also hate the author because I feel like she thinks that people are entitled to stuff like this. Oh, I hated it so much. I hated it so much. And also, again, in a genre like this, not everything has to be believable. I don't mind a little bit of eye-rolling, slightly unrealistic moments, but this one literally didn't make sense. It's as if Becky and her husband Luke are the main characters of the world. There's one point where his birthday goes viral on YouTube and people are uploading like thousands of videos that are getting thousands and thousands of hits on YouTube just saying happy birthday to him. But why would they care? Why would anybody care? None of it makes any sense. None of it. And all of these people with like really important jobs suddenly have all of this time to help make the party a surprise party. It didn't make any sense. Oh, and at one point she breaks his BlackBerry. He's accidentally received an email that would give away some of the surprise party and she doesn't want him to read it. So the only thing she can think to do is break his BlackBerry. It's like money has no meaning in this book. And so the fact that I now have 3 more books left, am I going to read these? This one is called Christmas Shopaholic, so I might read this one at Christmas, and it has had good reviews. I've heard that people like this one better than some of the others, so I think I'm going to save that one and give it a go at Christmas, but I really don't think I can stomach reading Shopaholic to the Stars and Shopaholic to the Rescue if it's going to be more of that crap. If anyone has read them, please let me know. Does she learn a lesson at any point in her stupid life? Those are my strong feelings. I need a big drink of wine now to calm down. Okay, the next book that I read was The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This was a very strange book, like very strange. This is one that my sister had recommended to me because she loves it, and I enjoyed it, but I also like don't quite get it. It's a romance between a supremely fucked up and selfish main character who might be as bad as Becky Bloomwood and a merman, which is cool. I'm on board with that in theory, but it was just so weird. Essentially, the story is this journey of self-discovery, and I did like that. I liked where the book went, and it was dark enough and sexy enough to be a fun read. There is a storyline with a dog, which was making me so anxious and stressed the whole way through that I really think that brought my enjoyment of the book down significantly, because I was thinking about this dog and worrying about what was going to happen to the dog the whole way through. And if you're someone who that matters to, I've got to warn you, it's not good. What happens to the dog is not good. So honestly, for the dog alone, I would say that I didn't particularly love this book, but it was a very interesting read, and I do recommend it if you're okay with the dog thing and if you're open to trying something very strange. And it is very funny. It's also very funny. Then I read these 4 books, which I've already actually done full reviews for in the video where I predicted what my ratings were going to be and then drank for every star that I got wrong. So I will link that video if you want to go and see the full ratings. I'll just give you like a very, very quick overview. We the Survivors by Tash Aw. This was a 5-star read about a man growing up in Malaysia, growing up very poor, who is driven by all of the events in his life to commit a murder. And then we're looking back to see what caused this. And go and have a look at my review to see all the issues being tackled in here. It's very nuanced and complicated, and it's one that has really stuck with me. All the Beautiful Lies by Peter Swanson is a very strange mystery novel about a boy whose father has just died under slightly suspicious circumstances. So he comes back from university and it's just him and his stepmother left trying to figure out what happened. But we also get lots of flashbacks into the life of the stepmother when she was growing up, and it's a very twisted book, but I enjoyed it. Say Nothing by Brad Parks is an action thriller about a man whose twins are kidnapped and being held hostage in exchange for him ruling a certain way in a court case. So it's really, really fun, action-packed stuff. Not a genre I would ever pick up usually, but I gave it 4 stars because I thought it was really fun. And then finally we have The Illuminations by Andrew O'Hagan, which is told between 2 perspectives, partly a woman in a nursing home who is losing her memory but has kind of flashes of memory of this rather sad past, and then we also have her great-grandson, or just grandson, but I think great-grandson, who is just coming home from Afghanistan, who has also gone through this terrible trauma, and it's this very moving story. I really liked it at the time and gave it 4 stars, but funnily enough, it's the one now that I'm struggling the most to remember what it was actually about. So it isn't one that stuck with me quite to the same extent, but it is one that I put the corner down on certain quotes because there were quite a few really beautifully written little sections in there that I wanted to remember. Then, this is my favourite book that I read in January, The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. So this is a short story collection. Short stories is something that I'm really starting to experiment with more. I have had a slightly rocky past with my history of how much I've enjoyed short stories, but I could not have loved this one more. It was so good. This was a definite 5-star read for me, already planning to put this in my best books of 2021. I'm saying it now, it's going to be in there. And what's so funny is that if you asked me why I don't like short stories, all of the things I would tell you, this book has. And yet it was still so worth it. So the reasons that I don't like short stories are because they just end. You spend that time getting really involved in a character, you care so much about their life, you can't wait to see where the story is going to lead, and then it just ends. And it usually hasn't been wrapped up neatly or anything. It's just like reading the first chapter of a really good book and then moving on, and I start to find that tedious usually. This book had that in spades because each one was so good. Each story had these fascinating characters and premises, and I kept forgetting it was going to be a short story and getting really invested, like I was starting a new novel, and then it would just end and it was so disappointing and they didn't have nicely tied up little endings. It was so frustrating, and yet they were so good. Each and every one of them was so good that I loved it. And I think something that really helps with that this collection has is a very cohesive theme. So it's called The Office of Historical Corrections, which is the name of one of the stories in here. The final story is actually a novella called The Office of Historical Corrections. But all of the stories in here share that theme of reframing the past, or correcting the past, or reevaluating the past. And so, particularly as the book went on, I was enjoying it more and more, because while the stories are totally unconnected from each other, they were all giving me a new way to look at that theme, so they felt connected in that way. Danielle Evans has written another short story collection in the past, so I'm definitely going to go back and read that, because I just cannot explain how much I loved these stories. They were amazing. So some of the stories in here that I loved the most. Boys Go to Jupiter is about a white girl who goes viral because there's a picture of her wearing a Confederate flag bikini, and she becomes more and more defensive. But we also get flashbacks to her past and her best friend when she was younger who was black and what happened in that story. And I mean, you just hate the main character, but she also feels very human, and the whole thing was very sad. There's a story, Alcatraz, which is about a girl and her mother and some other long-lost relatives going on a trip to visit Alcatraz, where their grandfather was held captive. Our main character's mum, who is this guy's daughter, has been fighting to have his name cleared because he didn't do what he was put in prison for. And they've just never managed to get his name cleared, and she really wants to fix that historical record, and that one was really moving. Literally each story I turn to I want to give you the whole story of, so I'm going to stop because you should discover them for yourself. But yeah, if I could only recommend one book to you this month or this year, it would be this. Even if you don't think you like short stories, give this one a go. Then I hauled and read Bridget Jones's Diary and Other Writing. So I have read Bridget Jones before, but this is a new edition. Look how cool it is! I read this one for work because I made a video which just came out yesterday on Book Break, so I'll link to that below, all about why Bridget Jones is such an icon. And I loved this so much. So we have the first Bridget Jones book in here, which is just even more brilliant than I remembered. It's so funny. Bridget Jones is everything that Becky Bloom would wishes she could be. She's a genuinely relatable character. Even though she is also very privileged, she's like a real human with flaws that you just love so much. So Bridget Jones is brilliant, and then in this edition you also have all of this other writing from Helen Fielding at the end. You get previous articles that she'd written before even writing Bridget Jones. You get a little extract from her diary, which looks very similar to Bridget Jones. You get an interview that she did with Colin Firth before he was in the movie. It's Bridget Jones interviewing Colin Firth, which is hilarious that Colin Firth then went on to become Mark Darcy. You get so much extra, and it just made me fall in love with this whole world even more. So really recommend this one. If you haven't read Bridget Jones before but you've seen the movie, it's still really, really worth reading. There's enough that's different in the story that you can still be surprised, and it's just so hilarious. The writing is so brilliant. That was another 5-star for me. Okay, then I hauled a book called Marlena by Julie Buntin. I actually hauled this one for a book break video and then kept it because it looked really good. It's about 2 teenagers. I haven't read it yet. They were friends when they were teenagers, but it was this one like really intense obsessive year of friendship, and then one of them dies at the end. And then we're looking back on this from decades later when the girl who survived is still like haunted by this past. So I just thought that sounded very good, so I picked that one up. I didn't haul too many books this month in general. You should be proud of me. I did haul this one, but not adding anything to the scale, it doesn't count because this is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, which is a book I've already read. I read it from NetGalley on my Kindle a while ago. This was, I think, my favourite book of 2019, so it's been a while, and I suddenly realised I didn't actually own a physical copy, so I picked this one up. I will link below to the video where I talk about this as my favourite book, so you can see what it's about, but it's fantastic and I will definitely read it again. And then finally, literally just this morning, I went down an internet rabbit hole of Amazon original stories. Sorry for mentioning Amazon, but I do have a Kindle and I never really looked at these before, and there are so many really great short stories that you can get as a one-off written by amazing authors. So I read Graceful Burdens this morning. I hauled it and read it by Roxane, which is a dystopia about a world where you have to have genetic tests to establish whether you are licensed or unlicensed to have a child, and like the slightest thing can make them not give you a license. And if you're unlicensed, then you are sterilized, and it's kind of, you're divided by class. Like licensed people are just above unlicensed people, but licensed people are also very, very restricted, particularly licensed women, in what they are and aren't allowed to do with their bodies. So it was a short story set in this world, and it was really moving. And basically there's this library, so our main character goes to a library where you can borrow babies. Unlicensed women can borrow babies and spend some time with a baby that they're not allowed to have. That's where it begins, but it ends up going on this adventure, and it was very short and very, very good. So thanks Roxane Gay. And then I also read another one called Will Williams by Namwali Serpell, which was a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe story, but I hadn't read the original. I liked this one, but it was dark. It was like, I found it a little hard to follow, maybe because I hadn't read the original, but it's about a guy getting increasingly paranoid. Ever since he was at school, he meets this guy who is a doppelganger of him and has the same name, but you're not quite sure if he exists. Other people don't seem to be able to see him, and this guy is always getting him into worse and worse trouble. We know that he is in prison, and we just watch his like descent into paranoia, and it's very blurred lines as to whether he actually did all these terrible things or whether it's supernatural in some way. Creepy stuff. It was fun. So if I've added that all up right, that means that I hauled 14 books this month but read 17 books. So my books are balanced. Well done me. So thank you so much again to Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box and go and browse their 15% off sale. And if you want a reminder, I am wearing the Celeste earrings and the Sarah bracelet, and I'm obsessed with them both. See you next time! I'm not trying to slow